I am going to give us a minute or so just to let everyone get in the room, and then we'll get started.
Sí, yo creo que es más por
As you join, if you could be sure to mute yourselves when you come in, that would be great. All right, let's get started. We'll probably have some folks join us as we go. But welcome to the 2025 Neighborhood Star Awardee Workshop. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. First off, I really want to say congratulations to all of our awardees. We are thrilled to be able to work with you this year. Thank you for your patience. I know it took a long, long time to hear about the awards, and it was longer than we had hoped or expected. So we appreciate everybody's patience and good grace on that. My staff is here. The Neighborhood Star and Cultural Star staff is joining me on this call, as well as some other folks from the city. And I'm going to have us quick introduce ourselves. Everyone else, if you could please introduce yourselves in the chat, talk about your business or organization and your name, that would be great. My name is Erin Lewis. I am the coordinator for the Neighborhood Star program, and I will hand it over to my colleague Naya to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Naya Hardiman. I'm a project manager on the STAR team. I primarily work on Neighborhood STAR, so a lot of you guys will be working with myself. But we have some other project managers on the call today too, so I'll pass it over to Grace.
Hi, everyone. My name is Grace Boobel. I'm a project manager as well with the STAR programs, and I'll be working with some of you for the duration of your grant. So welcome. We're excited to have you, and I will pass this over to my colleague, Jessica.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jessica Larson Johnston, and I am the coordinator for the Cultural Star program. So here as a support to the Neighborhood Star team, and happy to be here.
And our friends in Hero, would you like to introduce yourselves real quickly?
Yeah, hi, I'm Stephanie Bamer. I am with the city's Department of Human Rights and Equal Economic Opportunity, and I'm an interim manager, and I believe my colleague Sam is also on the call. She can introduce herself.
Hi, my name is C.U. Samantha. Again, from HERO Department, Human Rights, Equal Economic Opportunity. I'm a labor standard investigator. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks so much,
I'll pass
everyone.
it to
We also have Nancy Vang is on our team. She is another project manager, but she is not able to join us today, but you will get to know her as well. So thanks everyone for putting the intros in the chat. It's always good to see who all is here. So here's our agenda for today. We just went through some introductions. We are going to do some high-level tips and reminders. We will then go over working with a project manager, getting under contract, compliance, and insurance requirements. It's a lot of detail. You don't have to memorize all of it. From there, we'll talk about working with contractors and subcontractors, the closing fee, and working with Payment Works to get your draws in, how to do draw requests and reporting, and then how to kind of close out your grant and some additional information. We are being recorded. We're going to post this on our website for everybody who's not able to make it today, or if you want to go back and check. It should be up in a couple of days. We will pause throughout also, just a little housekeeping for questions. There should be some time at the end for questions as well. Staff will be looking at the chat also. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand and we will answer them as we can. So first off, some Neighborhood Star tips and reminders. This is kind of high level overview, some things to keep in mind as you're going with your project. We will cover all of these things multiple times in this workshop and throughout your project, but repetition is good. So the first thing I want to make sure that you all know is about timing. You have until the end of 2026 to get under contract for your STAR award. So at least one draw from there must be made by the end of 2027, and the contracts are for 2 years. What we really want to make sure you do, though, is get under contract in time, or we can take back the funds. So just make sure that you and your project manager have a plan in place to get all of this under contract by the end of 2026. Next thing to keep in mind is compliance. Your project will be subject to compliance requirements depending on your total project cost, the amount of your award, the type of project, etc. We will cover all of these areas in a lot of detail today, and it is a lot of detail. But like I said, you don't have to remember all of it. We will work it out with you as you go. But it's really important to keep in mind because it can increase the cost and the timeline for your project. Next thing to keep in mind is eligible expenses. You probably are aware it was in all of our application materials, but we can only reimburse for eligible STAR expenses per law. So that is for capital improvements and some associated costs. Any of those capital improvements that were in your application, that's the stuff we can reimburse for. If there are other elements of your project, just make sure that's covered with other sources of funds. Another thing to keep in mind related to that is keep really good records. So the Neighborhood STAR program is reimbursement and disbursement. And that means we're going to need to see proof of costs. We're going to need to see invoices, proof of payment, anything related to your project. You'll want to make sure that you keep a copy of that. It'll also help expedite the contracting and payment process as you go. And then finally, plan ahead. Our PED team, our small but mighty team, is managing hundreds of projects at any time. And there are a lot of steps. So payments can take 2 to 4 weeks to get to you. We try really hard to make it faster. But if you are in a tight timeline, that organization and keeping all of your documents, that's really helpful to getting things through smoothly. So plan ahead where needed. I am going to turn it over to my colleague Naya to go through some of the next steps.
Thanks, Erin. So working with a project manager, every awardee will be assigned a project manager from the Planning and Economic Development team, and we will be your main point of contact for getting under contract, managing compliance, and the disbursement process. Your project manager will be in touch with you in the next few weeks about the first steps to getting under contract. Getting under contract is the first step to being able to access your STAR award. It will include the dates of your agreement, the scope of your project, insurance and compliance requirements, and the remaining terms and conditions of the STAR program. Make sure that you've looked through your contract and have met all of the applicable requirements, especially those of you who may need to have your property rezoned or obtain any licenses or permits necessary for your project. We'll have until the end of 2026, so December 31st of 2026, to get under contract for your award, but we recommend that you do it as soon as possible so that you know of all of the requirements that will apply to your project. Your business must also be in good standing with the Secretary of State. So for those of you who haven't updated your Secretary of State filing for 2026, make sure you get on that because we require an active filing. And for any of you who are eager to take a look at any of our contracting documents, you can find those on our website now. Compliance. Compliance is probably the biggest piece that you'll work with your project manager on. So entities that do business with the City of St. Paul must meet a set of rules set by the city to ensure that local, state, and federal requirements are met. This is sometimes referred to as compliance. Whether or not compliance will apply to your project will depend on the sources of your funding, the total project cost, and your project type. We'll review more about the compliance and our insurance requirements today. But again, you're going to hear more about this in depth once you schedule a pre-construction meeting with your project manager. And we advise that you wait until you've met with your project manager, have had the pre-construction meeting, and understand all of our compliance requirements before you start your project. So just a summary of the compliance areas. First being that you may not discriminate against protected classes. You must comply with the city's insurance requirements. All of your employees must receive the pay due for their work, as well as earn safe and sick time and the minimum wage for your size of business. You'll hear about more about that today. If you receive $20,000 or more, the two-bid policy will apply. If you guys can please mute, thank you. If you receive $25,000 or more, prevailing wage and business subsidy will apply to your project. If you receive $50,000 or more, affirmative action will apply to your project, and vendor outreach program will apply if you receive more than $50,000. For awards of $100,000 or more, the St. Paul Living Wage Ordinance will apply, and for awards of $200,000 or more, the Sustainable Building Ordinance will apply. And for those of you who are more visual, here's a nice chart just to kind of outline the different project thresholds and the accompanying compliance requirements. So insurance is another big piece aside from compliance, and the city sets a $1.5 million coverage per occurrence requirement in order for your contract to be approved and in order for any of the funds to be released. For those of you who have a challenge with getting a $1.5 million policy, we recommend that you seek a $1 million umbrella policy to make sure that you're meeting that $1.5 million threshold. If you're using any personal or commercial vehicles in relation to your project, you may also need to submit those auto policies as well. And we also require proof of workers' compensation coverage. If you're exempt from this, we'll just need you to fill out a form explaining why you're exempt in the state of Minnesota. But if you have any questions about this, make sure that you're working with your project manager and the city's risk manager, Michael Cowell, whose contact information is on screen to determine any applicable waivers or adjustments.
Thanks, Naya. Before we
and
move
now-
into the next section, should we pause for questions? Does anyone have questions yet?
No questions in the chat that I see.
Okay, we'll forge ahead.
All right, I'll pass it on to the folks in Hero. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Again, I'm just as a reminder, I'm Stephanie Bamer. I'm with the Human Rights and Equal Economic Opportunity Department with the city. I'm the interim Human Rights and Labor Standards Manager. I want to first talk to you all about the city has a human rights ordinance that you all should be aware of. It prohibits discrimination against individuals based on their protected class. So you'll see on one side of the screen are all the different protected classes that are included in our human rights ordinance. And probably most important for you all to be aware of, those apply in a lot of different areas, but specifically in employment and public accommodations. So being aware of this anti-discrimination ordinance for the city, both as far as employment of individuals, but also as far as the community members that you're providing services to, that discrimination is prohibited. And then I'll pass it along to my colleague, Sam.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. Again, my name is C.U. Samantha, and a labor standard investigator from the Labor Standard Education and Enforcement Division under HERO. So just wanted to let you know that we do enforce 3 ordinances under our labor standard ordinance, wage theft, where employees in St. Paul should receive all pay they are due for their work, earn sick and safe time, which we call ESST. It creates access to pay time off from work for employees who perform work in St. Paul. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth for this for ESST. We do have different criteria, but in general speaking, all workers, they should earn 1 hour of sick time for every 30 hours of work. And that applies to everyone who works in the city of St. Paul, regardless of their work status. So if they're temporary, part-time, anything, all employees should be getting their ESST rights. We also enforce this minimum wage. It's a local hourly minimum wage rate for employees who perform work in the city of St. Paul. We can move on to the next slide. Thank you. And so this is just a reminder that workers have a right to earn a higher minimum wage for work done within the city of St. Paul. The city of St. Paul do have a higher minimum wage rate compared to the state, so it's important to keep that in mind. And this is also a reminder that beginning of January 1st of 2026, the minimum wage for business size that have 101 plus employee, which we call macro and large, are going to increase to 1637. While for small business, 6 to 100 employees, it will remain until July 1st of 2026. And in July 1st of 2026, it also will go up to 1637, which will be the city rate. Micro business who have 5 or fewer employees are going to have the same minimum wage and stay until July 1st of 2026, which then it will go up another dollar for to 1425. This is also a reminder that business size, how we determine business size depends on how many employees that you have nationally. We have different criteria for different section and stuff like that. And all of this information you can find more information on our minimum wage webpage and also for ESST. Here are some of our contact information. We do have the PCR coordinator information for PCR division, contract compliance, human rights investigator, which my colleague Stephanie is under, certain procurement, accessibility, and again, my labor standard division that I'm under. Our division is called the Education and Enforcement. We do provide ESST, minimum wage, and wage theft training if employer would like to have some because they're on, they just want to get some more clarification and detail for our ordinance. Feel free to reach us out. And thank you. I'll pass it back.
Thank you so much.
All right, so affirmative action also falls under the purview of the HERO department. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. Affirmative action is required for vendors and developers that have a contract with the city for $50,000 or more. It requires you to have an affirmative action plan or AAP certified with the city. It applies to projects where construction is happening, and your project manager needs to ensure that you have an active AAP certified before they can route your contract for signature and before any of your funds can be released. I know some of you guys may have an active plan, so if you think you have an active plan, you can check on the AAP Open Data Portal or contact YATAO. To certify your plan, a $75 check is required, and once certified, it will last for 2 years. There's no affirmative action exemptions for nonprofits, vendors without employees, LLCs, etc. Prevailing wage is our most common requirement for compliance. It's essentially a set of minimum wage rates for construction workers. So your contract will list all of the different minimum wage rates for different types of construction workers. So for an example, an electrician would have a different rate than a roofer would. And if prevailing wage is required for your contractor will need to ensure that they're paying their workers that rate and that those rates are being reported to the city. It's important to also note that prevailing wage may increase the cost of your project. So it's important when you're working with your contractor that you tell them as soon as possible that prevailing wage will apply to your project. Most contractors in the Twin Cities are familiar with prevailing wage, though some don't like working on prevailing wage projects because it requires more admin work for them with the reporting. So make sure that you're sending all of the prevailing wage paperwork to your contractor and that your contractor is submitting their payroll to the city. If they fail to either pay those minimum wage rates or fail to report their payroll, it can delay payment to you. And also an important thing to note is that any work occurring on the same site at the same time as your STAR project may also be subject to prevailing wage. So make sure if you have another project going on, even if it's not funded by STAR, that you're making your project manager aware so that they can work with you to ensure that everyone is in compliance with prevailing wage. And for any other specific questions on prevailing wage, you can contact the contract compliance email listed on screen. Vendor outreach is the final compliance requirement under the purview of HERO, and VOP is otherwise known as Vendor Outreach Program, is a set of business inclusion goals with 25% broken into subcategories for small, minority, and women-owned businesses. It applies to STAR projects with a grant award of greater than $50,000, excuse me. And it requires that businesses must be certified to count towards those VOP goals. But again, these requirements will be listed further in the slides and will be discussed with you again with your project manager at the pre-construction meeting. To access the CERT directory, you can click the link on the top portion of the slide. And when you're reaching out to CERT certified businesses, you want to make sure that you're keeping record of your solicitations and then the responses you've received from those businesses. You also need to include the VOP specs to your contractors and subcontractors, and any payment reporting can be done on the link listed on the bottom of the screen. We also recommend for those of you who don't have VOP applied to your project that you still check out the CERT list, especially if you haven't found a contractor yet. It's a great place to start looking for contractors. And we encourage all small and local businesses to become CERT certified. It's free and it's good for 3 years. So if you have any interest in that, we recommend that you contact the CERT program directly using the information on this slide. I'll stop for any questions about these compliance areas. All right, if there are none, then I'll pass it back to Erin.
Thanks, Naya. So I've just got a few more areas of compliance to cover with everyone. The next is Minnesota Business Subsidy Law. This is a law that simply says people receiving or entities receiving a business subsidy like a STAR grant must have a stated public purpose with goals around job creation, wages, and benefits to be achieved within 2 years. This applies to anyone receiving $25,000 or more, and the questions around public purpose will be included in your contract. So this is something you'll go over again with your project manager and will document. For awards of 150 or more, 150,000 or more, there are some additional requirements like a public hearing. That is very few awardees this round. So we will talk to you directly if you have one of those larger awards. There are some exemptions for nonprofits, but again, that's very few people. And just a heads up that there's annual reporting that the city does to the state about business subsidy law. Nothing that you all need to worry about, but just something that we track. The next area is St. Paul Living Wage Ordinance. This applies to anyone receiving $100,000 or more in a business subsidy, so a grant. And it says simply that recipients or tenants, which again, I don't think applies in this instance, must pay a living wage to each employee for either 3 years or the term of the grant, whichever is longer. The living wage is calculated this way: 130% of the federal poverty level for a family of 4, or 110% if health benefits are provided. We've got the 2025 rates listed here, but those will change in January. So they'll go up a little bit in 2026. Again, this doesn't apply to a lot of projects. If it does apply to you, we will be talking with you in more detail about it. There's an annual certification process required for everyone receiving a subsidy of this size, just proving that you are paying those living wages throughout your project. All right, sustainable building ordinance. This applies to even fewer folks. Anyone getting more than $200,000 in public assistance. So that can include STAR or any other public funds. So those bigger projects, you will be subject to sustainable building ordinance, which is for new construction and rehab projects. And it just says that you must be certified through an eligible green building standard. You are also required to comply with the St. Paul overlay about sustainability. If this applies to you, you will be talking with Kurt Schultz. He is our sustainability manager in the city, and he can help with your project manager to make sure that you are going through this process and documenting that throughout your project. That's it for compliance. I'll pause again for questions. Any? All right. Okay. Next, we'll talk just briefly about working with contractors and subcontractors. So occasionally this comes up in STAR projects about who holds the relationships and how do we work together with our grantees and with their vendors and their subcontractors. Big picture is we as the grantor have a relationship with all of you on this call, the grantees, and you have the relationship with your subcontractors and contractors and vendors. to make sure that they are following all of the terms of the STAR program in the STAR contract. So in other words, we work with you and you work with the folks, the contractors and subcontractors that you want to work with for your project. So just an overall sort of what we do and don't do in terms of working together with all of these parties. We do require and attend a pre-construction meeting with you. So that's something your project manager will set up for the grantee and themselves and our friends at Hero. And that is to go over, again, any of those compliance requirements. You are welcome and encouraged to invite any of your contractors to that meeting. It's really helpful for everyone to be on the same page. So if you know who you're going to work with, have them come along. The city also does provide ongoing technical assistance related to compliance for you or vendors. So if you had a question about submitting payroll information or something like that, we can certainly help you with that. The city also does require that contractors and subcontractors are in compliance with city ordinance before we will release funds to you. So we'll talk about this a little bit more later. But every draw request, it has to be approved by our compliance team. And then finally, the city does require grantees to comply with the HRA 2 bid policy, which just says you have to solicit 2 bids at a certain point and go with the lowest responsible bid. A few things that the city does not do. We do not pay contractors and subcontractors directly. So we can't send a check for, say, $10,000 to one of your vendors. We send that check to you, and then you pay your vendors from there. The city does not arbitrate or mediate between contractors, subcontractors, and grantees. And the city cannot compel grantees to use any particular contractors. Even when you have VOP or other compliance areas, we make sure those resources are available to you, but we can't mandate that you work with anyone in particular. And we also don't make recommendations for specific contractors to any STAR grantees. So again, we refer you to the CERT list. We think it's a great resource. We also cannot give you like real specific recommendations. All right, closing fee and payment works. So those of you who have had grants before, you're familiar with this, but a closing fee equal to 1% of your grant is due to us before we can release payment. So for example, if you have a $50,000 grant, you'll have a closing fee of $500. We will send you an invoice. Unfortunately, we can't take payment for that online, so you'll have to mail or drop off a check. And next is Payment Works. So this is our third-party system that we use to get money to you. This is relatively new, so we're going over what we know. Grantees who are new to contracting with the city or who have not yet done a Payment Works registration will receive an email from STAR staff in the next few days or weeks. And that will have a link and some instructions for registering with Payment Works. So a couple of important things when you register. Make sure to save your login information so that you can log back in and make updates. Payment Works is only going to work with you, the grantee, and we are not able to make any changes for you. So make sure that you save your login information so you can get back in that system if you need to. Your email may only be used once to set up a Payment Works account. So make sure it's the email account that you check and that you want to use for this project. You have to make sure that the information that you enter into Payment Works matches all of your other forms throughout the process. So your reimbursement forms, things like that. Make sure all of your information is correct the first time around. It'll make it easier for you. And in Payment Works, you can opt into ACH payments. So this is an upgrade from what we've done before, which is just mail checks. Now you can get checks mailed if you want, or you can elect that electronic payment. If you go for ACH, make sure to answer the phone if they call you and ask for some verification. That's likely the next step. And a reminder that Payment Works is a third-party service provider. The city doesn't have oversight to their process, and we can't log into your account. So this is on you to make sure you've got the right information. We do have some resources. So there are some websites about how Payment Works works on our city department websites, as well as some support for Payment Works themselves. And if you have other questions, you can contact our Office of Financial Services at the email or phone number here. All right, moving on to draw requests and reporting. How do you get paid? So you're going to work with your project manager to request funds. All of the requests must include proof of work performed and costs incurred. So an invoice, a receipt, something that says, here's what we're doing and here's how much it costs. If it doesn't include it already, we will need proof of payment of all the STAR funds within 15 days of disbursement. So let's say you send us an invoice for $5,000 to pay a contractor. We're going to want to see proof that you then paid that contractor with those funds within 15 days. We do retain 5% of construction costs until the project is done, and we have proof of project completion. Proof of project completion means the project is finished and everyone has been paid. So typically a lien waiver is the easiest way to show that, but there's some other documentation that can work as well. And then payments all must be approved by compliance and PED leadership. Again, it can take 2 to 4 weeks. Hopefully it won't take that long, but just know that there are lots of people looking at all of these draw requests to make sure that the project is in compliance. And then finally, a final report will be required of all of our grantees. We will send you a link to do the online survey. It is through SurveyMonkey. Prior to dispersing all of your funds, it's pretty straightforward. There are questions about the length of your project, goals, before and after pictures, etc. Fill out what is applicable to your project. Related to that, we also love to hear from you. So outside of your final report, if you have updates or an exciting event, or you have a ribbon cutting or something going on, and you want to let us know, please do. You can talk to me or your project managers to keep us apprised. We love to incorporate that into our communications as we can. So put it on our website, maybe do a video, any number of things. We have a small business newsletter. If you haven't, you should sign up for it. But yeah, keep us posted. We love to hear how STAR is impacting our community. We may also periodically be in touch with you to see if you want to be a part of some of our communications. To close us out, I'll share some contact information and then we'll have some time for questions. So here's our staff. You've met a bunch of us today. You can contact any of us at any time. Contacts for our HERO team are here. And for business subsidy and living wage and sustainability, you can contact Jenny and Kurt as needed. And with that, I'm open to questions.
I have a question. Can you guys hear me?
Mhm.
So the payment works. Is that kind of like the portal where because I didn't catch that part, where we'll be working to submit our documentations and everything for payment. Is that what it was?
No, so PaymentWorks is really just the portal for getting your information so that you can be paid. So once you set up that account, you will then work with your project manager to actually put together the documentation for your pay requests. PaymentWorks is just where you're going to put in the information about your email and your tax ID number and all of those things so that we can then pay you. It's just the mechanism for that.
Okay.
Good question.
I have a question. We
Yes.
requested 50,000 and were granted 25. So do I just assume that every line item that we had proposed, we cut in half, or is that something I negotiate or we negotiate with our project manager or your contact?
Yep, that's something you would negotiate with your project manager. So you can certainly change the scope of your project given the awards that you have. You wouldn't want to change it dramatically, right? So you could make it smaller or focus it or something, as long as it's consistent with what is originally proposed. It's fine to do some adjusting, and your project manager can help you with that.
And does that initial quotes that we got for costs of various components, if those costs have changed, that can also be part of the negotiation project or
Yep,
process?
absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah, for sure.
okay,
Yeah, you are not required at all to go with the original vendors that you got quotes from. That's not a requirement. That is simply to help cost out your project when you
okay,
apply. But if you wanted to go in a different direction, that's totally fine too.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're
I'll
welcome.
also add to that, Tim, that you'll likely need an updated invoice anyway, just because the date on the invoice will need to fall in the dates of your contract. So the earliest contract date will be the date that your award was approved by council, which was December 3rd. So your contract can start December 3rd and on, but just make sure that you have an updated invoice that's dated within those dates.
Oh, okay. So the timeline is from that award notification on. So if that is that what I'm understanding? So we
Yes,
could be incurring expenses now that would be reimbursed to this grant.
That's right.
correct.
Okay, good to know.
And it looks like we have some more questions in the chat. I see one from Laura that says, do we have to have already paid the bill to do the draw request, or is it that we can submit an invoice, get funds, and submit proof we paid within 15 days?
And the answer is both. So you can do whichever works for your project. If you need the funds to pay the invoice, you can send us the invoice. We, as long as it's all in compliance, we can send the funds to you. You can pay that invoice. Then we just need to see proof that that's been paid. If you already have paid something, you can also submit that, and then we will reimburse you. So either way works.
And then we have some questions related to project manager assignments and timeline for contact. One question is, when will our PM be assigned? And then is the timeline for being contacted by your PM within the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the timeline is within the next few weeks. With the holidays, I think it's a little bit longer than typical, but project managers, you can correct me. I think project managers will be reaching out probably at least to do an introduction email pretty quickly just to say hi. Um, all of our projects have been assigned. And so in the next few weeks, we'll get rolling on those, depending on, of course, like your timing and how quickly projects need to get done. Does that sound right, project managers? Okay.
Yeah, I would say
Um,
the actual contract turnaround though will likely be in the new year. Just with the bureaucratic process required to get under contract, with folks being out for the holidays, but you should definitely hear back from your project manager in the next week or so.
yeah.
And then a few more questions that are in the chat. One is, can the required fee come out of our grant, or does that have to be separate?
It does have to be separate. And part of that is due to like accounting best practices. So we do need that fee to be separate.
And then the other question in the chat is, do we not need to wait for the official city contract to be finished before we start spending money?
So technically, that is true. Technically, any of the work can start once the funds were approved, which was December 3rd. Practically, we highly, highly, highly recommend that you don't start the work until you have your contract finalized. And the reason for that is some of these compliance requirements are a little bit complicated and it can change how you're going to do your project, or it could change how you're going to work with your vendor. So we really, really, really encourage folks to make sure that they get under contract and fully understand all of those program elements before they start the work. If you start too early and then you are out of compliance, there is a very high chance that we can't reimburse for that work if it's not consistent with what needs to happen in your contract, if that makes sense. So do your best to wait until you're under contract.
And then another question related to contracting. Someone asked, when will the contracts be signed?
Like Naya said, in the new year, I mean, even if you get started now, you would go through all of the steps to get your contract ready. Then it needs to be signed by a lot of people. So there are a lot of steps in the process. I would be very surprised if contracts were signed anytime before like end of January at the earliest.
I'll add that project managers can only move as quick as we get the documentation. If we have everything together at once, it usually takes about a month or so to get a contract signed, but definitely you can get started on the contracting pieces once you hear back from your project manager in the next few weeks.
Any other questions? If not, oh, how hands-on are project managers for questions? They're very hands-on. So your project manager really is your first point of contact and really responsive, so they can help as you go. Best next steps. Like Naya said, any documentation that you can get together in advance, there's all the sample documents are on our website. So if you wanted to start thinking through talking to your insurance company to get your insurance up to speed and start working on anything else like a statement of work, that would be just fine. Otherwise, I would say there's nothing that you immediately need to do right this minute until you start having those conversations with your project manager. Grace or Naya, anything you would add to that for best next steps?
Most of you guys may not have submitted a W-9 with your application, but a W-9 will be required for setting up your Payment Works account. So if you want to get one filled out and have that ready to go for Payment Works registration, that would be helpful as well.
The recording will be available probably in the next couple days. It'll be on our website, stpaul.gov/nstar. All right. If there are no other questions, just again, thank you so much for applying. Thanks for attending today. We really look forward to working with you on your STAR projects. Please be in touch as you go with questions, and I hope everyone has a really nice holiday season.
Thank you so much, ladies.
You're welcome. Thank
For your
you.
time.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.